So I take that to mean, under the right circumstances, you, Barack Obama, possible U.S. Senate candidate from the state of Illinois, could support school vouchers and could even do so in your role as a state senator in the Illinois legislature.
No, what you can take that to mean is that I'm willing to listen to these arguments and see if they're, if I can be persuaded that ultimately kids would be better off, then
I would support it.
I would support anything that's going to be better off for the children,
including school vouchers, if you're persuaded.
Whatever's on the table, I think, has to be debated.
Quite a concession. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, and let's go over to Pledge of Allegiance.
Not only empowering parents by telling parents, you decide what school is best for you, whether it's a public school or a charter school, or you want to go to parochial or private school. We're going to support you. We're going to provide you with tuition support. But you're also telling the community, we're going to empower you to have a role in determining the destiny of your individual school. It's about parental empowerment and it's about community empowerment. Because right now, if you have if you live in a poor community and you don't have the income, chances are you're stuck going to that failing school, and then the community has no ability to transform that failing school, because that failing school is part of this citywide collective bargaining agreement, and because the central office is too terrified of the union to go in and to make fundamental changes in that school to make that school better.
Mr. Johnson, as a former teacher and Chicago Teachers Union organizer now for, I think, decades, with only 11% of black students at CPS reading at grade level and only 17% of Hispanic students at CPS reading at grade level, spending $28,000 per kid per year, don't you have to own all of that cost data and all of that lack of performance?
So you mean to tell me that you're going to make teachers and parents responsible for poverty? That's what you're asking me. Because listen, just hold on for a second though, because one of the greatest predictors to a student's outcome is the economic status of those families. Here's what the city of Chicago wants. They want a mayor who is willing to invest in jobs, in mental health services. Do you know how hard it is to concentrate in school when you're hungry and poor?
On any given day, between 80 to 90% of violent offenders, of the individuals who committed violent crimes, are walking the streets. So you want to know why the police can't clear cases? Because the community doesn't feel protected. There were 58 mass shootings in Chicago last year. Chicago led the nation in mass shootings, 58 mass shootings. 4 more people shot at a single incident. They made 1 arrest last year in the mass shootings.
We're taping this 12 days from the Chicago Mayoral runoff election. That's April 4. We're taping it March 23. Who is Brandon Johnson? He's running for mayor. He's a union guy. He's a teachers union guy. He's been loyal to them. He's always going to be loyal to them, no matter what he says. Hey, look, he's got millions from them. He's endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union. Taught for 5 years, but 15 years as an organizer. What does that mean? I don't know. We would have liked to ask him. Did he bang heads? Did he push people to sign up? Did he get zillions to sign up? Did he make a lot of money? Is that what his skill is? Is that who you want to be mayor of the city of Chicago? Somebody who's basically, you have to say it, he's in the pocket of the Chicago Teachers Union. He's being paid by them now. He says, well, he'll stop being a member of a CTU, leadership in other ways, if he's elected mayor, but you know, you don't think he owes them? I'm just saying. I would have liked to ask him that. Be fair, let him answer it. We tried, didn't come. Paul Vallas, who's he? Well, Paul's been around for a while. 70 years old, Johnson's 45 or so, a bit older. 25 years, maybe 28 years, I don't know. Started in 95 when he was the first real reform guy, superintendent at CPS, 1995, and really been doing schools ever since in Philadelphia, in New Orleans, in Connecticut, in Haiti, more complex. He runs complex school systems. He has run other organizations that are complex, other big major projects in Haiti. Big public servant. A lot of that was not for remuneration. That's who Paul Vallas is. So We'll talk more about it as we get into the show, but it's about time somebody gave you the lowdown. Who do you want? Who do you want to be mayor? We discuss. You decide. So more on who Paul Vallas is. Paul is an optimist. If you ask him, can you do anything to fix this system where only 10% of blacks and 17% of Hispanics students at CPS, 10%, 17%, those are the numbers of how many of those individuals by ethnicity read at that grade level. Can he fix that? He'd say sure. He said he made it better. He made it better in the 5 years he was at CPS, 1995, 6 years, 1995 to 2001. He's done it at other cities, other areas. He's saying it's gotten worse now. He's saying the unions, really, he's saying that. Unions have done a lot of harm, Chicago teachers unions. They've been way more in control of things in the last 20 years. Really, that's Brandon Johnson's. It's on Brandon Johnson. We'd like to have asked him. He declined to do the interview, so we'll have to guess a little bit about him. But Vallas is an optimist. He'd say more time on task is what they need. Double English classes. That's what he did. Double English periods, okay? Give them more time. Get them back in school. So many left due to COVID. The policies of the Chicago Teachers Union. Yep. Brandon Johnson says, no, it was the governor. Well, we discuss, you decide. Vallas says poor kids of any race, black, white, green, they can learn. He opposes what George Bush called the soft bigotry of low expectations. Race and poverty are not barriers. They're impediments, they're obstacles, but they're not walls that can't be gotten around. That's what Vallas would say. He cited numerous examples of people who once were poor and did extremely well in their schools, certainly knew how to read, went on to become generals and went on to become presidents. Really, whether white, black, Hispanic, this is America. This is America. I think Vallas would say that.
The overwhelming vast majority of those carjackers are young people, 17 years
Juveniles.
and younger. But that doesn't include all the crime. The Tribune did a study of violent crime in the first year of the pandemic, when schools were shut down, schools were completely shut down. And did you know that 8% of the murders were committed by individuals 17 years and younger, and 9% of the shootings were committed by individuals 17 years and younger, and 32% of the assaults were committed by individuals 17 years and younger. So the bottom line here is shutting schools down, keeping schools closed, not having schools open, and even when schools reopen, not having an extended day, extended year, not having activities that are school-based to keep the kids off the street and engaged. Those were also contributing factors, and those were man-made decisions. Those were decisions made by the mayor's office to cave into the teachers' union repeatedly that kept hundreds of thousands of students walking the street. The public is not afraid of the cops. The public is afraid the cops can't protect them. And they're afraid the cops can't protect them because they don't have officers on the local beat that they get to know and that they're familiar with. There's no witness protection program. So that if they are giving testimony, they can be protected. If the cops do make an arrest, there's a strong likelihood that Kim Foxx is not going to charge them. And if they are charged, there's an even higher likelihood that they're going to be released on felony bail and sent right back into the community. So I would be prepared to push to bypass the state's attorney when she makes decisions not to prosecute, and to create what I refer to as a judicial review unit that would be able to draw public attention to decisions that the state's attorney makes and that the judges make when it comes to not charging people, when it comes to releasing dangerous felons on bail, when it comes to imposing light sentences on repeat offenders. And those are things that the mayor can do unilaterally.
Look, the impact of closing schools for 15 months, Vallas talks about that. Johnson says No, well, not a big deal, you know, you had to do it, pandemic. Can't blame the teachers' unions. I wonder if they were the main cause of that closing. Did Mayor Lightfoot sort of back down to the unions? And was it harmful? Lots of research shows just how harmful it was. Brandon Johnson doesn't seem persuaded. Look, as Vallas said, the public is not afraid of cops, but they are afraid that cops can't protect them. Emma Mitz, alderman, 70 years old, African American. She says she and her fellow 70-year-old and many others who aren't 70 and aren't grandmothers like she is, they want more police in the black community, not less. Brandon Johnson, he says defund the police. Now he says he didn't say that, but we saw the tape 2 years ago, and he was asked, and he said, defunding the police is not just a slogan, it's a campaign goal. Now he says, well, he didn't say it was his goal. Huh? He was just commenting it could be a goal. We would like to ask him about that. Didn't want to show up.
Mr. Johnson, you attended an event in 2020. It was called We Don't Call Police. And that same year you said it was a political goal to defund the police. Here is what you said.
The President of the United States, the former President of the United States, President Barack Obama, took it one step further as well, and basically said that the effort of the defund police movement lost an audience because of that that slogan, I guess is what he's calling it, which I don't look at it as a slogan. It's an actual real political goal.
So, Mr. Johnson, what do you say to Chicagoans who do want more officers in their neighborhoods?
Well, my public safety plan does just that. It's why in my public safety plan, we're going to promote, train, and hire 200 more detectives so that we can actually solve crime in the city of Chicago. You know, it's going to cost me roughly $50 million to make sure that we are actually administering the consent decree. You know, right now, we're not administering the consent decree and we're not solving violence in the city of Chicago. By promoting and hiring 200 more detectives, we actually can solve crime.
Only half the high priority 911 calls are being responded to. 400,000 911 calls not being responded to because there were not police cars available. So we need to return to community-based policing where we have beat integrity. We also need to return to community-based policing where the CTA platforms and the CTA stations and the trains have the presence of police officers. The first thing you do is you make the type of leadership changes and changes in scheduling and changes of management of personnel that do not cause 1,000 police officers to leave every year. And then the second thing you do, and if you do that, there are hundreds of police officers who will in fact return. Those who have retired will come out of retirement. Those who have transferred to other police districts will return. So you can very quickly begin to supplement the ranks.
If you tell about somebody, there's no protection. You're on your own. Vallas has been talking about that for 4 years ago when he ran in 2019. What does Johnson say about that? I don't know. Really haven't heard much on witness protection from Brandon Johnson. Light sentences on repeat offenders. Vallas talks about that. That's no way to get people to stop.
We're doing three things. We're not arresting. Okay. Only 30% of the murderers since 2017 have been actually arrested. Okay. Only 4% of the shooters. Imagine that. That means if you don't get killed, chances are they're never going to find who shot you. When we do arrest, Kim Foxx doesn't charge at 3 times the rate that her predecessors did not charge. So she is reluctant to charge. She clearly isn't charging for minor offenses, not like shoplifting or vandalism or things like that. Forget it. I mean, they're even carjackings. I mean, at the end of the day, but violent offenders, she's refusing to charge violent offenders at 3 times the rate. And then if they do arrest and they do charge, they're releasing. They're sending between, I think it was close to 75% of the individuals who are arrested for felonies, for violent felonies or for serious gun crimes are in fact provided with felony bail. So they're sent right back into the
Who
community.
does that? Who makes that decision? Tell me about
It's a
that.
combination. But clearly, if the state's attorney is not insisting on high bail, so it's a combination of the state's attorney and the judges. Don't underestimate the degree to which having 340,000 kids out of school walking the streets significantly increased the amount of crime in the city. Not only the number of murders and shootings, but also the number of carjackings and vandalisms and assaults. So clearly this contributed to the problem. But the problem in Chicago, it's the combination of the way we responded to COVID with the fact that we also entered a period where they reduced the size of the police department. They eliminated vacancies. They failed to have a strategy to recruit new police officers to replace the exodus of police officers that were leaving. And they so demoralized the police with their restraints and in some cases punishing proactive policing. And they're putting police officers on 12-hour work days and canceling days off, that there has been this massive exodus of officers, so that, even if we wanted a larger police department, the police officers are leaving at 4 times the rate that they're being replaced. And this is all a leadership issue. This has nothing to do with COVID. Police officers leaving because they're constantly being abused, or they're not supported, or because they're constantly put on 12-hour work days, or their days are being canceled. I mean, not only the stress on the officers, but the stress that it is causing, the punishing impact that it has on their families.
Nobody's doubting. The issue in this race is violence. The dispute is who has the solutions, who has the ways to reduce violence. Vallas has let police do proactive policing. The police, he says, are in fear of being reprimanded for doing constitutional proactive policing. They play by the rules, they do what they're supposed to do, and they're still going to get reprimanded. They still may lose their job. They still may lose fired. So they still may be fired. So they're just not going to do this. And that's no way to run a railroad. You can't go after people when police want to hang back. Johnson, he's still talking about Adam Toledo. We won't go into all the details, but last time I looked, nobody was convicted of anything for their sad, unfortunate circumstance, but I don't know that the police did anything wrong, but Brandon Johnson does. It's terrible. What? What was terrible? I don't know. We tried to ask him. Vallas has said, look, if you don't get killed, we'll never find who shot you. That's about what it takes. You want the police to find who shot you? You can't just do it if they shot you. Even if you were critically wounded, the data are, you got to get killed. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. The arrest rate overall is down about 75%. That's not good. What's Johnson going to do? He says, I'm going to get 200 more detectives. And it's not going out new, we're going to promote. He really wants to promote. Why so much emphasis on that? If you're down 2,000 police, if you've got 1,500 vacancies, why don't you fill them and in the process get more detectives? I don't know. Ask him that, but he's not there. Vallas says you've got to arrest, you want to arrest the right guy, so you want to make sure your investigation is appropriate, constitutional, and if it's a career criminal, you better think about detaining them, because as Vallas says, at any point in time, 85 to 90% of people who've convicted felonies are walking the streets. Is there any wonder the crime rate is so high? You really got to detain some of those people. Is that what Brandon Johnson's saying? We don't really know. I said to Brandon Johnson, I gave him the data. WirePoints puts this out. Only 10% of black CPS students read at grade level. Only 17% of Latino CPS students read at grade level. The spending has gone up 40% in the last 4 years to $29,000 per kid per year. Maybe if you round off, it's $30,000. I said, don't you, Brandon Johnson, have to own those cost data, have to own that low performance data. And I didn't mean the kids. I'm not blaming the kids. I'm not blaming the parents. I'm blaming the Chicago Teachers Union. They are in control of that school. I mean, when Janice Jackson, when the CPS superintendent didn't want to close down the schools, but the CTU made her do it, she resigned, I'm told, in disgust eventually. Who controls that? Who controls that school? I said, don't you have to own it? He said, he has turned it back on me. He said, Mr. Berkowitz, are you going to blame the kids and their parents for their poverty? Huh? No, I was saying blame you. Blame the Chicago Teachers Union. I'm not blaming the kids. The Chicago Teachers Union is opposed to school choice. They're standing in the door and say these kids can't even leave. Because if they leave, the Chicago Teachers Union loses jobs and they lose money. So they're concerned about jobs and they're concerned about money. Performance, not so much. Am I being too harsh? I don't know. He didn't come. If he came here, we could have asked him. Paul Vallas was here. He spoke out a year ago. We'll show you some of that. Maybe you've seen it already. He's for school choice. He said, you cannot be against school choice and for kids. And he says he is for kids. He's for school choice. And that day, a year ago, he didn't say just public school choice, private school choice, anything that you could do to get the kids out of those failing CPS schools, out of those terrible statistics of 10% and 17%. Give them a chance. Give them a chance. All these kids want is a chance to learn how to read, to become proficient at math. That's what he said. The choice could not be clearer on education. The choice could not be clearer on violence. Johnson's talking, oh yeah, 200 more detectives. Oh yeah, spend a little bit money more here. Oh yeah, divert money from the police to fund the police, put it into mental health. Look, all those things may be important, but until you start treating criminals as criminals, not as victims, you're not going to change anything. Vallas has said that along the way, not Brandon Johnson. The choice could not be more clear. You folks voting on April 4th, it's a choice, not an echo, to coin a phrase. You can decide. Ask yourself, what has Brandon Johnson done to deserve to be the leader of the city of Chicago? Has he promised you about property taxes? Seems like he's promised you an $800 million increase in taxes coming out of the chute. Vallas has said he doesn't want to do that. Vallas decided his record when he was at CPS of, I think, never raising property taxes, or if he did, by a small amount. But Johnson says Vallas is the problem now for any issues we have 25 years later, whether it's finances, whether it's pensions, whether it's violence. It's ludicrous. It's bizarre. I guess I'm supposed to be balanced. I think I am, but is there any other way to describe blaming Vallas for something 25 years ago? Really? I mean, and look at the data, look at the performance. And what, Philadelphia brought him from Chicago because he did such a terrible job in Philadelphia. That was a public record. And New Orleans brought him from Philadelphia because he did such a terrible job in Philadelphia and Chicago. And Haiti brought him because he did terrible. I mean, it's laughable. I think I'm the only media person who's ever asked that question right here. Hey, Brandon, I'm being unfair. You show up. We'll give you a show. You get plenty of time. You get more time than I will have or had to talk. I dare you. I dare you. Okay. That's it. I've had my say. Now it's your turn. April 4, the voters. We're taping this on March 23rd, and a poll on the Chicago Mayoral contest came out just today from Victory Research. And what did it say? Well, if you go back to February 28, when some people refer to that as the primary, it's the initial vote in this election, Vallas had about 34%, Brandon Johnson 20. Some say once all the votes came in, it was 33-21. So however you look at it, he had a 12 to 14 point lead, Vallas did, over Johnson. Some would say he should have been more aggressive. I mean, he was being baited by Brandon Johnson, and the strategy apparently was not to engage. And so that lead went from, let's call it 12 points, to 6 points a few weeks ago, and now it's gone to a statistical tie, according to the Victory Research poll. 46.3% for Paul Vallas, 44.2% for Brandon Johnson. Margin of error, 3.4%. That's a statistical tie. Congratulations to the folks who were running that campaign and decided to go not so aggressive. You've now brought that 12-point lead down to a tie. Now what will you do with 2 weeks left? What's the Brandon Johnson base? It has to be the union vote, the public sector union vote, not necessarily the private sector. Won't go into why. Vallas thinks he's got a lot of, maybe even the majority of the private sector union vote. Public sector union vote, those folks are with Brandon. He's the guy who's going to butter and jam their bread, okay? I'm not saying anything that people don't know. So that's his base, those public sector unions. But Vallas's base, he says, are the people who believe crime is out of control and we ought to have a safe city. That's his base. That cuts across geographic areas. It's all over the city, crime. And who thinks he's got the solutions, the basics, the blocking and tackling to stop and reverse this skyrocketing crime. Vallas says his people, his base, believe that parents ought to have a right to choose a school that is best for their kids. It shouldn't be. Johnson says that's terrible. It should be public education. You shouldn't pay. I don't know what he's talking about. If you take the $29,000 per kid per year that we spend on CPS now, federal, state, local money, and you give it to the parents, they're not paying anything. You, Brandon, you're paying. You're taking the money from you and your constituents at the Chicago Teachers Union, and you say, you don't get this unless you compete and attract the students. The money follows the kids, okay? The money follows the kids. That's the base. That's what Vallas is depending on. He's looking around the city and he says, do you want crime to stop? I've told you how I would do it. And it makes sense. It's a plan. Brandon Johnson says, we're going to devise a plan. Vallas says, here's the plan. And you want to fix those numbers about the kids who can't read at grade level? Johnson says we can't do anything. They're poor, tough, okay? Maybe we can go out and raise the incomes of the parents and give them better jobs and give them better homes and give them better television and cars. And eventually, when their economic status is better, because he told me, he said, Jeff, that's the primary determinant of how kids do. So I guess until you change that economic status, screw it. The kids can't be helped. Vallas says, screw that, okay? Putting it bluntly. That's the difference. Have I said it clear enough? That's just saying what people should know. Okay. That's all there is, folks. You got it. I haven't left anything on the table. So you come back next week and every week. Next week it might be the last time we can talk with you. You know, it's like talking to a jury. They can't talk back. You just remember, you come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.